Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social Podcast. Today I'm joined by Twan.
Hello.
And we too will be discussing the first day of the European Championship Cyclocross held in Rosmalen. And we had the women's race and the men under 23 race, and especially that women's race, it was really a thriller, Twan, wasn't it?
It was a beautiful one to watch, one of the best races of the season so far.
Tell us a bit about what happened in that race, because it was certainly a pleasure to watch that.
In the first lap, nothing really much happened. It was Eva Lechner who took the head start, came through with quite an easy tempo, which made for a group of about 10 people with most of the expected names in there. As we went to the pit zone, it was Betsema who crashed, which gave Alvarado and Worst a bit of a gap. And it looked like these two were gone, but it was Alvarado who had a bit of a struggle on one of the hills, basically clipping together a little with Worst, and this gave Lucinda Brandt an opportunity to come back. Unfortunately for her, for the second lap in a row, she made a mistake on the what would be a bit of an off-camber uphill section, and that basically made sure that she again was dropped. It looked like for a moment she might be dropping back to Betsema and Castellijn, but she really mounted a strong chase, and Alvarado and Worst were. It was just beautiful to watch, just beautiful riding tempo. But as they came through into the final lap, it was Lucinda Brandt who managed to come back and connect with the group. She immediately went and flew over the two, but both had seen this coming and were pretty much immediately onto the wheel. As we went into the sand section, it was Worst who was clearly struggling to keep up when it came down to the running part, but as we entered the second sand sector, it was Alvarado who had taken the lead and Brandt who made a crucial mistake, which unfortunately ended her challenge for the title here in Rosmalen. Worst was able to get around and get back on terms with Alvarado, but she made a few mistakes, had to take a lot of risk, and it was Alvarado who never handed off the leading position and took the European title.
Let's take a little closer look at that battle between the top three, Worst, Alvarado and Brandt. Alvarado won, but do you think that she was actually the strongest? Because Worst and Brandt both made some crucial mistakes, especially Brandt had quite a lot of them. Do you think that without those mistakes they would have been able to beat Alvarado?
I think Worst also got hampered a few times by small mistakes of Alvarado when she was in second position. This definitely could have been closer. Alvarado certainly had an advantage when it came to the running parts and used these very well, but it was so close. I think Worst could have won here today.
I think so as well, because especially in the last lap when she made that, when Brandt made that mistake in the sand pit and Worst was slightly behind, that she came back there, that was pretty impressive. And especially a bit later on, she had a gap again and closed it again. Although she was digging really deep, you could really see that she gave it her absolute everything. And then she at some point even looked to overtake Alvarado, but Alvarado quite...
Yeah, that was on the final straight in the field. You saw her nearly coming alongside Alvarado and you thought this was the moment that she was going to push on. But unfortunately, I think she settled in behind Alvarado, hoping to overtake her on the final straight. But
I think Alvarado abruptly closed the door, that she moved over, and Worst probably got a bit scared and surprised by that move, and then thought to back off in the hope to overtake her on the final straight again. Because even again after that move, before the final corner, you could see Worst tried to do the same again. And Alvarado did the same again, and then on the final straight there just wasn't any room anymore for her to pass Alvarado because it's such a short straight.
Yeah, definitely. It was a very interesting final.
Yeah, and for Brandt, we could say that I think Brandt was maybe slightly less good than the other two.
I think the technique at some points is still lacking a little bit. You saw it in the sand pits where she needed at least like a decent section. She didn't need anything special, but she went so far left on that section that it really screwed up her momentum and everything, and that's just where she dropped like 5 seconds easily.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you look at this race, you could clearly see that her technique wasn't quite there. Vorst and Alvarado taking absolute great turns, and then you have Brandt, and it just looks to be less fluent the way that she turns in. It's not with the 100% confidence, and it's probably because she started cyclocross a bit later, and she did improve her technique. But then if you look in the final lap, when she's under pressure, that's not the way how you take a sandpit. You don't hang over to the other side to try and compensate immediately going in. Then you're already not going into the sandpit in a correct way.
Yeah, and I think you saw it when it came off the bridges. I think she got overtaken on those like small downhills twice, going into corners, once by Worst and once by Alvarado. She was able to re-overtake Worst going into that first sand section, which was quite crucial. But yeah, you certainly can see that she is lacking something there.
Yeah, and as well, especially those in the coming off the bridges, it's not the place where you often get overtaken. It's maybe also a tactical mistake, because you know if you're going towards the crucial sand section that everyone wants to be in front, and it's not the time to stop pedaling when you go down a bridge. You should keep putting maximum pressure so you can go into that sandpit first. And if you go into that sand section there first and you make that mistake, there's no way Alvarado and Vorst can pass you, and then you might have an entirely different race.
That's definitely true. Of course, Worst was able to pass her in this instance, but with 2 people behind there, at least she would have not lost as much space. And I think Alvarado would have been closer on her wheel than Worst was at that moment. So then you would have indeed gotten a lot of different scenario, because Alvarado would probably have to go off the bike as well there.
Well, for sure, it was an interesting race to watch, and I think those are basically the main things of the top 3. Vorst and Alvarado look to be matching each other, just like at the end of last season, and hopefully they can provide these duels every week, because it's certainly a pleasure to watch.
Yeah, it was beautiful, especially when they went through the forest, like those parts when they were pushing it. It looked amazing.
Or on the stairs where they were side by side, shoulder to shoulder. But let's take a look at the complete top 10, because we already said Alvarado won in front of Vorst and Brandt. 4th place also goes to a Dutch rider, Denise Betsema. Perrine Clauzel finishes in 5th. Eva Lechner, Sannekant, Yara Kastelein complete places 6 to 8. And then Alicia Frank and Ellen van Looy round off the top 10. If I look at this top 10, there's 2 things that really stand out to me. 1, the performances of Betsema and Kastelein. What happened with them? Because Betsema was nearly a minute down and Kastelein 1 minute 41. I would have expected them to be closer towards Brandt, Vorst and Alvarado, considering what we saw the last weeks.
Yeah, I had hope for that as well, a bit like in Ruddervoorde, what we saw there. I think Betsema is just the last week, like in Koppenberg as well, missing a little bit of power. Yara Kastelein, not the greatest positioning at some points in the first lap, for example, placing herself behind Kant, just not really the smartest thing to do. I am pretty sure she was in 5th in the last lap, and that we saw her crash on the uphill off-camber where Brandt had struggles as well. And I think that is why she lost so many places. But yeah, that's very unfortunate. I really hope that we would have seen a group of 5 at the front instead of the 3 we had today.
Well, I would have missed the crash from Kastelein, but you are right. I saw her in 5th place as well for almost the entire race. So I would believe you if you think she crashed, because it does seem plausible to me. And I mean, Betsema, yeah, she hasn't been the greatest the last 2 weeks. Maybe she's still looking for some form or something else, and it's definitely not a shame, because you're in 4th here. It's still 4th of Europe, and 4th of Europe almost equals 4th of the world, because in the exception of a few American and Canadian riders, there really aren't any others that can really compete for some top 10 places. So it's definitely not bad, but it's not good either.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think we might have to take a slight bit into consideration that she had a bad start as well, basically having to come from like 20th place after the first corner. So that maybe could have cost her a bit extra energy as well, but I don't think that would have made the difference between making that first group or not.
And of
But
course,
it was that
crash.
crash that caused it.
Yeah.
It was in the pit zone, so basically she tried to take the turn too tightly, I think, and that's where she lost the grip and went to the ground.
So it was certainly not ideal for her then today, but I mean, it's still a long season. She already won a race, and she's already raced more races this season than last season, considering her suspension. So if she moves further forward on the starting grid, it will help her. However, Perrine Clausel finished 5th, 1 place behind Betsema. Big surprise to me. I mean, I'd already seen her earlier this year in the results of 2 crosses in Switzerland, but when she came to Belgium, results 17th in Ruddervoorde, 21st on the Koppenberg. Not really the results that you would think, this is somebody who's going to challenge for top 5 in the European Championships, but still, 26-year-old girl from France, definitely a good performance.
Yeah, it's good to see. Definitely a surprise for me there. I think we usually see 1 or 2 surprising names in the top 10 in the European Championships, and hopefully she will be able to continue this line, finishing ahead of the likes of Lechner today.
Indeed, and for Lechner, I mean, I don't really know if there can be any worse track for Lechner, because it's super fast, super explosive, and it's like the entire opposite of what Lechner likes.
Yeah, I think Lechner just did a solid job, did really well in that first lap to get the head start and just able to ride her own tempo. I think you really see that the differences weren't that big today, which might be a little bit an advantage, but yeah, she just did a very solid job.
Then I think we've discussed almost everything of the women's race, which was definitely a really nice race to watch. But before the women's race, there was already other race, and that was the men's under-23 race. Tell us what happened there, Twan.
In the early stages, we had a group of 6 split off, including Rijenkamp, Pim Ronhaar, Kyle Achterberg, Tim van Dijken, Cameron Mason, and Thomas Main. Unfortunately, Van Dijk had a bit of what seemed like a bit of a silly crash in the forest section. Cameron Mason was able to get around him and back into the group, but unfortunately that was the end of Van Dijken's journey there. And later on we had an attack by Pim Ronhaar. Rijenkamp was the only one able to follow that one, but it was Pim Ronhaar who had a bad sand section, and that was where the reigning U23 world champion was able to ride away from him, and Ronhaar pretty much imploded as both the British and Kyle Achterberg passed him, and eventually the 2 Brits left behind Kyle Achterberg and went on to fight for the silver medal, because they would never see Rijenkamp again. He would win the U23 European Championships, and it was Thomas Main that outsprinted Cameron Mason.
So Rijenkamp indeed took the European title after his world title that he took last year, and he never looked to be out of control of this race. He always looked confident, looked to have something behind his hand in case that others would come close. There was really nothing you could do about him today, was there?
Yeah, the only thing that I would note on this performance is I think when they came through for the start of lap 3, there seemed to be a bit of frustration. I assume this was aimed at his teammate and fellow countryman Pim Ronhaar, maybe for not taking turns or something. But for the rest of the race, he just looked very solid. He looked like someone that's really ready to take on the elite level, as we have seen over the start of the season.
Then in second and third, we find 2 Brits. Personally, I think it's very good for the sport that we have 2 Brits in the under-23 category ending on the podium in front of a bunch of Dutch guys, because I do think that especially Cameron Mason, I'm 100% sure he will stay in cyclocross. And Thomas Main, he rides for Tormans. Well, Tormans is a team where you can perfectly combine road and cyclocross, so I'm also quite confident that Thomas Main will stay in cyclocross as well. And it would be really nice that maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, when we look at the men's elite race, we can see not only Dutch and Belgian guys, but we can also see Main, Mason, Pidcock, and there's some more exciting British talent coming through. But these look to be the 3 main guys, and it would be definitely nice to see them in the mix with the Dutch and Belgians.
Yeah, it was an absolutely lovely performance, and it's really good to see for the sport that 2 British riders are able to contend in this race. I think Cameron Mason, to me, basically from lap 1 looked like dropping, but the guy apparently has it seemed like great endurance, because the guy just keeps on coming back and then ends up being in the fight for that silver medal. Thomas Main also riding a very solid race here today.
About what you said about Mason, you're right, but I see him do this quite a lot of times actually. I remember in Dubendorf, he had a pretty, is it a bad start? I don't know if it's a bad start. I don't know if he does this deliberately, that he just paces himself, because I remember in the first lap he was like 22nd or something, and slowly he moved himself towards the front, finished 8th in the end. Today, you were right, in the first lap, I thought, where is Cameron Mason? In the second lap, you see him coming forward and forward, he passes riders, he passes more riders, he passes Thomas Main. Thomas Main in the final lap finds some energy probably somewhere from his toes, so he can still pass Mason again. Definitely a good performance by him. It looks like he can perfectly pace himself during the race, that he never blows up.
Yeah, it's something that I definitely find impressive, and a really good quality to have as a cyclocross rider.
I definitely think that Cameron Mason is someone who can make progression and would be an addition to the sport, considering the fan base that he has on social media, and especially from Britain. He could just make the sport more. It's already pretty accessible for fans, but he just takes it another step further, which is definitely good for the sport.
Yeah, those videos are always fun to watch, especially to gain another perspective on a race weekend.
Exactly. So let's take a look at the entire top 10. We just told you Kamp won in front of Main and Mason. In 4th place we find the beginning of a bunch of Dutch riders. Carl Achterberg ends 4th, Pim Ronnaar 5th, Tim van Dijk is 6th, Mees Hendricks 7th. Then we find Loris Rouillet in 8th, and the 9th and 10th place are both wrapped up by Italians. Filippo Fontana in front of Federico Seolin. I hope I pronounced that good, but I probably didn't. What do you think about these names in the top 10? We see a bunch of Dutch riders: Achterberg, Ronnaar, Van Dijk, Hendricks. I personally went for Ronnaar as my pick for the win. He ended 5th in the beginning. He looked good, but he probably just went a bit too hard in the beginning.
Yeah, I think he might have overestimated himself today, just making some small mistakes, which cost him the connection to Ryan Kamp, and something might have snapped mentally there as well. When he crossed the finish line, didn't exactly look all too happy, I'm really honest.
Then we find Carl Achterberg in the top 5. He's even 4th. This is a bit of a surprise to me as well, and like you said, there's always a few surprising names. You know this guy can ride a bike. He ended 12th at the World Championships under 23 last year. He has gotten some good results in the past years, but then to end 4th on a championship is definitely a surprise. I thought he would top 10, but definitely not this high.
Yeah, I don't think he thought he would finish this high himself as well. As you saw him cross the finish line, he seemed really happy. Celebrating it as well. It's something I really love about cyclocross. People just celebrating minor placings as well, not just the victory. He seemed a bit surprised with this as well, and it's really nice to see him up there as well.
I think he was also happy that Kamp won, because he pointed at the scoreboard above his head. So I think he was happy with and the win for probably his friend Kamp, and the performance for himself. Then we saw in 6th place, like I said, Tim van Dijk, the Dutch guy from the Jumbo-Visma Academy. And in 7th, the number 3 of the last year's World Championships in Dubendorf, Mees Hendricks. Probably he won't be satisfied with this result, but he started all the way from the back as well, if I'm not mistaken. So I saw him move forward during the race.
Yeah, I am not sure he even came within the first 20 around the first lap. And in the second lap, he was in 13th. So he certainly made a push up. Did this together, I think, with Loris Rouillet, who crashed in the first lap. So they would have accompanied each other for most of the race, I would think.
Yeah, I think so as well. And looking at this, I mean, Mace Hendricks, I think he is definitely a talented rider who has some serious potential, but it just needs to come out at some point. But you should give him time. He ended third last year at the World Championships for a reason, and that reason is that he's just a very talented and good rider. And maybe overtaking is pretty hard on this parcours, especially through that forest section. No way you're passing anyone there. You can easily lose a chunk of time there.
Yeah, I think both riders, both him and Rouillet, had a bit of trouble in the first lap. I'm not saying they definitely would have been with the front group, but I think they would have been close either way.
Well, you already mentioned Rouillet's crash. He ended 8th in the end. Do you think that he could have done anything more without that crash?
Yeah, I definitely think he could have done more. Of course, you can't know exactly where the guy would finish, but you would think that he would be challenging for the top 5 at the least.
Yeah, probably. I think he would have been close to Ronhaar in the end, because he crashed pretty hard as well.
Yeah, I must admit, I did miss the start of this race, so I didn't exactly see that.
Well, I saw he hit the fence at the inside of the corner, like I think it was the third or fourth corner, with his shoulder pretty hard. So
those are never nice.
No, and then he was probably somewhere way at the back. First, I even thought that this was already game over for almost everyone except the guys who were in front of them, because he looked to block the road, but luckily they could pass him, because otherwise it would have already been game over for everyone except the Spanish guy and 2 or 3 other guys. So, yeah, I mean, Rouillet, bad luck, but like I said with Hendricks, his time will come. And the last thing I really want to mention is the Spanish guy that I just mentioned, Ivan Feio Alberte, taking the head start, absolutely going full gas, and then disappearing and withdrawing from the race. I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but it was definitely strange to see.
He got his TV time, I guess, although it was just a live stream on the site of the European Championships. Yeah, I guess doesn't quite have the engine that is required to keep that up for the entire race.
I mean, we don't know what happened there, so anything could have happened. He could have crashed or mechanical issue or whatever. So, because he was running fairly decent. I mean, he wasn't able to keep his position at the real front of the race, but the top 10 could have been possible. But now these top 10 went to 2 young Italian guys from 20, and then there's a 19-year-old Italian guy who finished 11th. Let's hope that these guys stay in cyclocross in the upcoming years.
Yeah, let's hope we see them a few more times in Belgium racing, and that they can develop themselves and hopefully challenge for even more.
Then I would like to make 2 honorable mentions, one to Roy Maguire and the other one is Dario Lillo, 2 first years under 23 riders. Dario Lillo, I remember him from the World Championship Cyclocross last year. He ended 4th in the juniors race, just off the podium, and Roy Maguire finished 9th there. Nice to see these guys being able to compete here. Oh, actually, there were still some first years under 23 who finished in front of them. I completely missed them. Hugo Anaïn is a French guy. He ended 14th, and Hugo Kars from the Netherlands ended 15th. So these are definitely some guys we should keep an eye on, because I think they will improve themselves during the season. And I mean, well, there aren't any under 23 races for the time being, but if they are there, I think we could see them challenge for top 10. Do you have anything else that you still want to mention, Twan?
No, I think it was a beautiful race, and it's unfortunate we don't get to see as much U23 racing anymore as we used to do. I think like the next U23 race is probably going to be the World Championships.
Most likely, yes, but there's nothing we can really do about that. Expect just hope that the situation improves in the near future, and that they will allow these youth races to go on as well. Then tomorrow we will have the men's race and the women's under 23 race. We will be discussing those on a separate episode of the Cyclocross Social Podcast. So make sure that if you like this to follow this on whichever platform you listen to this, because it's available on all platforms, YouTube, Spotify, whatever, you can find it there. And then I would like to thank you guys for listening and thank Twan for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
And then I will see you guys tomorrow to talk about the men's and women's under 23 race. In case you don't know where to watch, make sure to check cyclocrosssocial.com. Goodbye.